Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So this was discussed in the bore of an interview that was Leslie Stahl's interview of President Trump on 60 Minutes on Sunday night. Oh, my gosh, what a waste of 25 minutes.
Yeah, and received horrible ratings, by the way, compared to the first time he was interviewed on 60 Minutes.
So one of the questions was about the Fed hiking interest rates. We had that pullback in the market last week, and Trump expressed his displeasure with his Fed Reserve chairman while admitting the obvious that independent board can't control their decisions, but he's not happy about it. He likes low interest rates, not high interest rates, low interest rates. And the question is, should he be worried less about interest rates and more about 6-year high in deficit spending, $800 billion deficit running this fiscal year, according to reports yesterday, particularly against the backdrop of record high federal tax receipts. So the D.C. press corps focuses on the deficit spending because when a Republican's in office, they're deficit hawks. And frankly, to be fair, Republicans should be deficit hawks with respect to other Republicans when you have Republicans in office. You shouldn't just wave off deficits and the accumulation of debt because Trump's in office and Obama is not. It's a problem. And his lack of interest in entitlement, structural reform of entitlements, is a problem too. And we've talked about that on this show since he was a candidate. But not a spend problem. Record high federal tax receipts, $1.8 trillion, but you're running, very high budget deficits as well. How much does that continued debt accumulation matter in terms of the long-term health of the economy?
Yeah, and it's the highest in 6 years since 2012.
Prospect for jobs, job creation, and so forth. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Jim Iuorio. He is a CNBC contributor, also the proprietor of Brant's in Palatine, which reportedly has the best burger in Chicago.
We should do a live remote from there because I'm really hungry right now for a burger.
Jim, thanks for joining us.
To do a live remote anytime you want.
We'll
All right,
have
very
our
good.
sales staff call you.
Good.
So, Jim, square the circle for us on the federal tax receipts and the deficit spending.
Well, okay. You mentioned the spending increase in the deficit spending, and when I argue with liberals, they look at me like, and they're spending a lot, and I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. That's the one thing I don't understand. If they could articulate something to me, if they would say, and whether it's President Trump or Larry Kudlow comes out and says, we believed that we were at such a high tax burden, high regulatory burden over the last 10 years. The only way we can solidly kickstart things at this time was to go kind of a weird Keynesian thing, act almost like we were coming out of a recession, even though the recession had already been behind us. But we're going to increase government spending temporarily, cut taxes and regulations, and then slowly work our way off that. They've never said anything like that. It makes really no sense to me. Like we said before, the tax cuts and the regulatory rollbacks, of course they were going to work. Of course they were going to pay for themselves. Anyone who said that they weren't going to pay for themselves was just wrong. And to make their argument for them for a second, yes, repatriation has front-loaded a little bit. Yes, the government spending itself has increased some of the tax receipts. Sure, but they've paid for themselves in almost a year and a half's time. To me, that's astounding. I don't know why they're spending money, and I'd love to know.
All right. I want to get your take on other big news here in Chicago, and that's the filing for bankruptcy protection by Sears. There's a really good piece, I don't know if you saw it, in City Journal by recently deceased contributing editor Stefan Kanfer. And he sort of gives us the history of shopping malls. 150 years ago, it was Sears Roebuck catalog.
Yeah, we have Sears houses that people bought from catalogs that are on our street. There's 3 remaining, but it's really the store that changed America.
Well, so there was the catalog, and then there was the big department stores, the Gimbels and the Marshall Fields in Chicago and the Falines and Neiman Marcus and so on. And then came the shopping malls in the suburbs when you had a bunch of World War II veterans returning home and getting out of the city for the expanse of the suburbs. And then the fourth, of course, is the internet and Amazon. And the question is, can some of these, number one, I mean, you've got shopping malls that are in deep Bandini, So are they the next to go after Sears? And what does that mean for economic vitality in the suburbs in particular?
Well, I think one of the things that concerned me is that everybody looks at this Sears story and says Sears didn't adapt to online purchases, Amazon defeats Sears, Sears goes home. And that's not really true because Costco, Walmart, Target are just a few that have done fine with stores. The reality of it is that there was big changes, people buying things online, and there were small changes, big box stores, and Sears adapted to neither of those. But the demise of Sears, which is fascinating, by the way, because one of the things you mentioned too, in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, Sears was 1% of the GDP. Amazon right now is only 0.8% of the GDP, so Sears was enormous. But the reality of it is that, and we talk about rates all the time, and you know what, at my core, I'm a rates trader. And ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, over the last 10 years was designed so that companies, states, pension funds, all these people could fund their debt cheaply, work out their problems, so then we come out the other side of whatever you call that slow slog in the economy was, those companies would be more equipped to handle the new world. Some things don't do that. Sears didn't do it. They didn't take care of anything. As a matter of fact, they just kept divesting very viable businesses. Allstate, Dean Witter, Land's End, all these things they spun out and just left themselves with I can't think of a word I can say on the radio, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, what about Kmart locations? Is that part of this?
Well, it's the same, but the problem is, and it's the real estate part of it is nice and it's good, and Walgreens lets us know that you can be, a real estate company as long as you have viable stores too. But the Kmart and Sears combination, that's only one thing on the positive side is the real estate. The bad news is that they don't really have a retail niche. So they're getting the invisible hand. It's BlackBerry, it's Palm, it's when companies have it's sitting in the absolute catbird seat. And the reality of it is, too, is that to be beaten by Amazon, I know I just said that wasn't the only reason, but Sears invented that model of shopping from home. And for them not to have noticed it when it was starting to gather steam seems to be almost a crime.
Well, also the real estate piece of it with Sears, that turns out to be somewhat of a problem too, because they've got a lot of real estate in terms of where they sited their stores in high property tax and sort of lower income parts of big cities.
It's fun how that works, isn't it? That's not a good equation, is it?
No.
So here we are then.
We're going to
Well,
a lot
but-
of empty storefront. I mean, the Sears on Lawrence at Six Corners. What are they going to do with that space?
Yeah, I mean, this speaks to this idea that you can easily revitalize these white elephants around the west and south sides of the city, the south suburbs, and other areas that have seen better days than today.
And they come up with policies that continually drive them away, and then they wonder why they've been driven away. You can beat your head against the wall trying to figure this stuff out forever, and you're not going to. I think there's just some dumb people who are politicians and urban planners in big cities.
What about the impact in the more successful suburbs at this point, more economically upscale suburbs at this point? But you've got huge malls, which say Northwest Suburban Cook. You've got obviously the malls in Schaumburg. You've got Oak Brook. You've got these big malls, and the projections are, that you're looking at 25 to 30% of malls that may fail in the coming decade.
Well, I think it's a big deal, but as long as it happens relatively slowly, that's just creative destruction in my mind, and things will come around. One of the reasons I got into the restaurant business was looking at the retail business and things gravitating toward our online. What was going to be the benefit of it? What couldn't be replicated online? And that was like the social gathering places. And I believe there's something to that. People got to go outside of their house. They can't just sit on a computer all day. I don't think anyway. So I think as long as the problem is not creative destruction over time. The problem is that when it happens too quickly, and that happens in a lot of things too. Like you mentioned, the stock market juxtaposed against rising interest rates. The stock market was perfectly comfortable with interest rates going higher until they gapped higher and went high quickly, and it was the rapidity at which they went up last week, not the ultimate level they were at, that caused some distress in the stocks.
Well, with respect to interest rates then, what's your assessment of the Fed's approach thus far to try and unwind from 10 years of easy money?
This goes against, because I was so against all the easy money, and now I'm against how quickly they want to take it away. And people will listen to that and think that there's a weird irony and a contradiction, and I don't think so at all. We've gotten the economy used to low rates, and I want rates to go higher. But this is going to take a long time. This is something we've never faced before as far as having rates so low for so long. And in my mind, all that does is encourage bad habits, whether it be from states, from pension funds, whatever. So I think the Fed should continue raising rates, but not be so aggressive with their rhetoric and not be so aggressive with their timetable.
Wow. As a business owner in Cook County, I mean, you have to make sure that your customers are pleased and keep coming back because of your high tax bill, correct?
Oh, there's no question about it. If you were in the restaurant business, you would think that they set up the regulation and the taxes under the assumption that most restaurants pocket a bunch of cash. So if you're a restaurant that doesn't pocket cash like us, it's amazing. It seems like it's almost punitive what they do. So I'd take a half hour of your time if you sat in our office and you'd laugh your head off when we tell you all we have to pay and all the regulations we have to adhere to.
Yeah, it's funny. So as long as you're not sitting on the side of the desk where you're writing the checks.
Exactly right. That part, when I say funny, I don't mean the traditional
right,
sense of funny.
right. Tragically funny, Shakespearean.
But again, we have a line out the door. I don't understand if you have a restaurant that's trying to get by. Well, that's why so many restaurants fail, obviously.
Yeah.
He is Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor, the owner of Brant's in Palatine. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.